Orbit is the deepest insight into how transformation in business really works. But first, you need to know a little about physics. There's no math involved. Don't worry about it. It's really easy to understand. Sir Isaac Newton was the greatest physicist of all time up to that time. And he explained how the planets went around the sun. Then the atom got discovered, but no one knew what the atom looked like. And so Niels Bohr, who was a more modern day physicist, decided to use Newtonian laws to try to figure out what an atom looked like. And he figured it must look like this: a hard center with an electron going around in an orbit. A hard center with an electron going around in an orbit. And I want to go back to this when you can see the electron is in a lower orbit, and then here it's in the higher orbit. The way it gets to the higher orbit is if you add energy to it, it jumps up to a higher orbit. So for example, if I walked up to you and I grabbed you around your bum and lifted you up, I could lift you to a higher orbit, but that's because I added energy to lift you up. And that's the same with an atom. If you add energy to it, the electron can go from a lower orbit to a higher orbit. And it just goes there. Seems pretty obvious. However, Newtonian physics is wrong. And therefore, Niels Bohr's model of the atom is wrong. And who is right? And why is there a problem? And here's the problem. If the electron is at the lower orbit, and then you add energy to it, and the electron goes to the higher orbit, then you should be able to see the electron on its way. But physicists can't see it on its way. They can see it at the lower orbit, and they can see it at the higher orbit, but they've never seen it going there. Why? And the answer is quantum physics. What Einstein said is, things don't move gradually and smoothly like Einstein said. Things move in quantums. Things move in discrete packages. So you can have an electron at a low orbit, and you can have an electron at a higher orbit, but you can't have an electron halfway. So Newtonian physicists are going, what? How can you be here and then suddenly be here and not go there? And Einstein said, that's what quantum physics is about. An electron can be here and an electron can be here, but it can't be halfway. It just ceases being here and starts being here. And that means that you too can stop being here and start being here in an instant. You can have a wildly better marriage, a wildly better sex life, a wildly better love life, a wildly higher income, a wildly less debt in an instant, even though you currently now don't believe it. The reason you don't believe it is because your science teacher in high school taught you Newtonian physics. And you remember these rules even today. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. We've all had to memorize that. Why did your science teacher in high school teach you Newtonian physics when it's wrong? And here's the answer. Because your science teacher didn't understand Einstein, but he did understand Newton. And so he figured I might as well teach Newton even if it's wrong, because at least I understand it. Your science teacher couldn't teach you Einstein because he couldn't understand it. And so now you are laboring under a misconception. You think that things move gradually, and they don't. Things move suddenly. Things can change in an instant. And every physicist knows that. And the average person is still stuck in Newton's laws where they think things take time. Well, things take time, you know, everything takes time. Nonsense. It's not true. And I'm going to give you many examples of that. So Newton said a little bit of effort produces a little bit of result. Einstein said a little bit of effort produces no result whatsoever. Results come in packages. So Newton thought if you give a little bit of push, the thing that you're pushing will move a little bit. Seems to make sense to you, but it's not true. What Einstein says, if you push the thing less than one package of energy, it won't move at all. If you move it one package of energy, it'll move 1 unit of distance. If you push it with 2 units of energy, it'll move 2 units of distance. But you can't move it by 1.5 packets of energy because there is no half a packet. A packet is the smallest. And when you put 1 packet of energy, it moves by 1 unit of distance. Nothing more, nothing less. It's startling and it's true. And I'm going to give you examples that are going to blow you away. So what causes this quantum leap? When a huge input of energy comes, then it jumps from the low orbit to the high orbit in an instant, not over time. And what is the quantum leap for you? There's you now. There's your quantum leap. And there's you sooner than you imagine. What is the quantum leap? What is the energy? It's a huge source of energy. And what is the huge source of energy? It's coaching. Coaching is the huge source of energy. Notice that the arrow is faded now because you don't actually go from where you are now to where you'll be soon. You actually jump there in an instant, in a shockingly short period of time. Things take decades if you believe in Newton. Things take seconds as soon as you understand Einstein. Lots of people have enjoyed quantum leaps, and I'm going to give you some fascinating examples. Let's talk about Oprah Winfrey. She was raped by her uncle. She conceived in rape. She was therefore disgraced and disadvantaged, spoiled goods. She had to give away her son on birth. She was distraught. It was horrible. Women were disadvantaged back then. Blacks were disadvantaged back then. She had no hope whatsoever. You would think that she was going to lead a life of poverty and disgrace. But her giant burst of energy was people noticing that she had a huge heart, that she was so loving. So they gave her a radio talk show, and then they gave her a television talk show, and then she bought it, and it was her own talk show. Now she has her own network, and she is the first Black woman self-made billionaire in America. The first Black woman self-made billionaire in America. Why? Because her heart is such a giant quantum leap. She ran the most loved television show in America for 25 years in a row. Let's talk about Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle is very pretty. And she was the star of the lawyer TV show called Suits. And I used to really like watching Suits. And I have to admit, one of the reasons I liked watching it is because Meghan Markle was so pretty. But if all she had was pretty, then a few years from now, when she's not pretty, she will go into the dustbin of cute young starlets who got old. However, what was her giant burst of energy? She got a marriage proposal from a royal. And as a result, she will be known in history forever, just like Princess Diana. That was her giant quantum leap, marrying a royal. Justin Trudeau, for my American friends and my British friends, you may not know who that is. Justin Trudeau was a completely unknown high school drama teacher. Completely unknown. Nobody knew the guy at all. What was his giant burst of energy? He's the son of Canada's most loved Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. During Pierre Elliott Trudeau's reign as Prime Minister, it was called Trudeau-mania. because women in the front 5 rows, when Pierre Elliott Trudeau walked on stage, would scream as if he were Elvis, as if he were the Beatles. This is a prime minister. And they treated him like the Beatles or like Elvis. And then his son, who had no political ability of any kind, no aspirations to be political, nothing. He was an out in nowhere high school drama teacher, but because he has a famous last name, he is now Prime Minister of Canada at this moment, and he'll be known in history books forever. Now, he is good looking, but there's a lot of good looking guys who don't get elected Prime Minister. And even though his father was the most loved Prime Minister we've ever had in Canada, he never created a majority government. And his son, Justin Trudeau, in his very first election, won with a majority, eclipsing his own dad. But it's only because he has a last name Trudeau. If he didn't have the last name Trudeau, he would have never, ever got elected, would never have got into the White House. He would have never been known by 100 million Americans. He would never have been known by 35 million Canadians. That's the burst of energy. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Zsa Zsa Gabor was a 17-year-old, very pretty girl. 17-year-old, normally you're just learning about life. But Zsa Zsa Gabor, at age 17, was quite different from a normal gal. She had already been married and divorced and remarried. You might say, when did she start? Age 3? Like, how is that even possible? But who did she remarry? She remarried Conrad Hilton, one of the wealthiest men in the world at that time, who supported her in her acting career. And now she's been a famous movie star for half a century. What was her giant quantum leap caused by? Marrying Conrad Hilton, who, because of his position and branding, could get her into movies. You see what I'm saying? It didn't take Zsa Zsa Gabor decades to break in. Because she married Conrad Hilton, she was starring in a movie the next morning. That's what I'm talking about. That's quantum physics. Sir Richard Branson was a young entrepreneur. What was his giant burst of energy? He hired a transformational coach. And I know that because in his very first book, called Business Stripped Bare, in the very first paragraph of the introductory chapter, he said, I owe all my success to my transformational coach. So his coach taught him what to do. And now he runs 400 companies, and he's one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he's certainly the wealthiest man in England, maybe in Europe. Wow. Not over decades. One transformational coach, and he learned gigantic lessons. So now my story. How has this been true in my life? Well, I was a salaried employee, and my giant quantum leap is I hired a powerful real estate coach, Robert Allen, the _1 real estate coach in the world. And as a result, I have purchased a total of 1,100 properties, totaling $500 million in buying and selling in today's money. One powerful real estate coach. And I went from a salaried employee to a mega rich real estate guy because of the quantum leap of hiring a real estate coach. That was the giant energy input. How about polar race? I was a 60-year-old guy, and I was introduced to the concept of polar race. It is a 350-mile, month-long foot race to the magnetic North Pole, hauling a 100-pound sled at -40 degrees, dodging polar bears. I was introduced at age 60, and from age 60 to age 62, for 2 solid years, I trained every day between 1 hour and 10 hours a day, every day for 2 years. The quantum leap was I hired a powerful high Arctic coach who taught me how to handle myself in the extreme cold. And as a result, I have now completed possibly the world's toughest race, 350-mile month-long foot race to the North Pole, hauling a 100-pound sled at minus 40 degrees, dodging polar bears. 160 people have crossed the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat. 400 people have been to outer space. 2,000 runners have broken the 4-minute mile. 5,000 climbers have conquered Everest. But only several dozen people have ever reached the North Pole under their own efforts, and I'm one of them. And I couldn't have done it without a high Arctic coach. He taught me how to poop. You might say, you knew how to poop, not in the extreme cold. He taught me how to erect a tent at minus 68 degrees. He taught me what the rules were of handling myself in the extreme cold. And because of that, I completed polar race. Wow. And that's what I look like at minus 68 degrees. Wow. I decided to learn the 5-foot circus unicycle in my 40s. It's not possible. You need to do it when you're in your teens because you need muscle memory. And when you're in your 40s, you can't do it. The quantum leap is I hired a coach and learned the 5-foot unicycle in 1 day. A teenager can learn the 5-foot tall giraffe unicycle in a couple weeks. A 40-year-old cannot learn it at all. I hired a coach who was herself a rider of a 5-foot tall giraffe unicycle, and she taught me and I mastered it in 1 day. That's the power of a powerful energy input. You can achieve anything faster than you ever imagined. And there's a picture of me on a 5-foot tall giraffe unicycle. Wow. It took me 1 day. Crazy. And as a speaker, I was 39 years old. I was broke. I was depressed. And the quantum leap was I hired a powerful speaker coach. And as a result, I've been earning millions of dollars a year for 37 years. And that speaker coach was with me for 1 weekend. In 1 weekend, I went from 39-year-old life loser, broken, depressed, to someone earning multi-million dollars a year. I wasn't just a multi-millionaire, I was earning multi-millions a year in 1 weekend. That's the power of a quantum leap. That's the power of a giant energy input. So there's you now, there's your quantum leap, and there's where you'll be sooner than you could ever believe. And now I want to explain to you something. Ice is frozen, obviously. And if there are, what do you call, if there's dirt, what do you call?
Like debris?
Yeah, if there's debris, if there's dirt in the ice, if you leave it as ice, is it easy or hard to get the dirt out of the ice?
Difficult.
It's
hard.
extremely difficult. Very good. If you add energy so that it becomes liquid, most of the dirt falls to the bottom. Is it now harder or easier to get the dirt out?
Easier.
Yeah.
Easier. Now add more energy so that it turns to steam. The water that evaporates and then condenses is absolutely pure, with no blemishes, no dirt of any kind. So the more energy you put in, the purer, P-U-R-E-R, the purer that you are. You can be messy and have lots of dirt in you when you're a solid. Add energy to you and suddenly you're way more pure, and then add more energy and you're the purest possible. That's what happens when you get a giant energy input. There's several. So now, this is my very last slide. That's why I've called my coaching program the Orbit Coaching Program, because with the energy input from my coaching wisdom, you suddenly leap up to a very much higher level. And I have an exclusive coaching program. I only allow about 7 people a year. I charge $100,000 for a year, and I charge $50,000 for a half a year, but I have a sale on right now. I have never done it before. I'm doing it because of COVID, because people need my help during COVID. And so I am not degrading the program very much, just a tiny little bit, but I'm dropping the price unbelievably, because if it's right for you, I want to give you that gigantic energy input. I don't even have a slide for it. And yes, there is a payment plan.